What happens when one of Hollywood's most unpredictable legends sits down with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? The answer is something nobody saw coming. Jack Nicholson's appearance on The View was supposed to be a lighthearted conversation about his storied career. A few laughs, maybe some classic Nicholson charm. Instead, it turned into one of the most intense confrontations in talk show history, ending with security escorting him off the set. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us what you think about what's about to unfold. The studio audience was buzzing with anticipation as Jack Nicholson walked onto the stage. The applause was deafening. Here was a man who had given us The Joker, Jack Torrance, and countless other unforgettable performances. He settled into his seat with that signature grin, the one that somehow manages to be charming and slightly menacing at the same time. The hosts welcomed him warmly, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. Whoopi Goldberg asked him about his latest project, and he responded with witty anecdotes that had the audience laughing. But then Joy Behar leaned forward. "Jack, I have to ask you something that's been on my mind," Joy said, her tone shifting from friendly to probing. "You've played some pretty controversial characters over the years. Do you ever worry about the impact those roles have on society, especially in today's climate?" Jack's smile didn't fade, but something changed in his eyes. "Joy, I'm an actor. I play characters. I don't run for office. I don't preach from a pulpit. I entertain people. But don't you think entertainment has a responsibility?" Joy pressed. "I mean, some of your characters have been pretty problematic. The way they treat women, the violence, the attitudes." "Problematic," Jack repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "That's an interesting word. You know what I find problematic, Joy? People who think art should come with a warning label and a permission slip." The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room change. Sonny Hostin jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "I think what Joy is trying to say is that we live in a different time now, and people are more aware of how media influences behavior." Jack turned to Sonny with a look that could cut glass. "Sonny, with all due respect, people have been saying that since the beginning of cinema. They said it about James Cagney. They said it about Marlon Brando. They said it about every actor who dared to play someone who wasn't a Boy Scout. And you know what? Those performances are still celebrated today because they were honest. They showed human beings in all their complexity, not sanitized versions approved by a committee." Joy wasn't backing down. "But Jack, surely you can see the difference between showing complexity and glorifying bad behavior. Some of your characters, frankly, have been misogynistic. They've treated women like objects. And you think I personally endorse that?" Jack's voice was rising now, the famous Nicholson intensity coming to the surface. "Joy, I've worked with some of the greatest actresses in the world. Diane Keaton, Jessica Lange, Helen Hunt, Kathy Bates. Ask any of them if I treated them like objects. Go ahead, call them right now." "That's not what I'm saying," Joy responded, her own voice getting louder. "I'm talking about the characters, not you personally." "Then why does it feel like you're putting me on trial?" Jack shot back. "You invited me here to talk about my work. But what you really want is for me to apologize for 50 years of performances that millions of people loved. You want me to say that I should have played it safer, been more careful, worried more about offending people." Whoopi tried to intervene. "Nobody's asking you to apologize, Jack." "Really?" Jack turned to Whoopi, gesturing toward Joy. "Because it sure sounds like that's exactly what she wants. She wants me to stand here and say that playing complicated, flawed, sometimes terrible human beings was a mistake. Well, I'm not going to do it. Those characters exist in the real world. Pretending they don't, refusing to portray them honestly, that's not art. That's propaganda." Joy's face was flushed now. "So, you think any criticism of your work is just censorship? That's pretty convenient, Jack. Maybe some of us just think you could have made different choices." "Different choices?" Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean safer choices? More palatable choices? The kind of choices that don't challenge anyone or make them uncomfortable. That's what you want from artists now. Just give the people what they already think. Reflect back what they already believe. Never push any boundaries or ask any difficult questions." "That's a ridiculous oversimplification," Joy snapped. "I'm talking about basic human decency. And I'm talking about artistic freedom," Jack countered. "Something that used to matter in this country. But now, apparently, if you play a character who doesn't meet modern standards of behavior, you're somehow responsible for society's problems. That's absurd, Joy. It's intellectually dishonest, and frankly, it's insulting. The other hosts were exchanging glances, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Sarah Haynes tried to redirect. Maybe we can talk about some of your more positive roles. What about As Good as It Gets? That showed real character growth. But Jack was locked onto Joy now. And she wasn't backing down either. You can call it whatever you want, Jack. But the fact is that actors have influence. What you put on screen matters. And maybe, just maybe, you could acknowledge that some of those performances did more harm than good. Name one, Jack demanded. Name one specific performance of mine that did harm. Real measurable harm. Not hurt feelings, not offense. Actual harm. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jack wasn't finished. You can't, can you? Because there isn't one. Because movies don't make people do terrible things. Terrible people do terrible things, and pretending otherwise is just an easy way to avoid dealing with real problems. So we should just ignore the impact of media on culture? Joy's voice was incredulous. That's your argument? My argument is that artists shouldn't have to answer to people like you. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped. The audience gasped. Whoopi's eyes went wide. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Joy's face went from flushed to pale, and then back to red again. People like me? Joy's voice was dangerously quiet now. What exactly does that mean, Jack? It means people who think they have the right to judge art through some moral checklist, Jack said, not backing down an inch. People who want to retroactively apply today's standards to work that was created in a completely different context. People who reduce complex performances to sound bites and controversy. I have every right to have an opinion about your work, Joy fired back. That's what critics do. That's what audiences do. We react. We analyze. We discuss. Or are you saying that once you put something out there, nobody's allowed to examine it? Examine it all you want, Jack said. But don't sit there and suggest that I or any actor has blood on our hands because we played characters you don't approve of. That's not examination, Joy. That's a witch hunt. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to jump in. I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a breath. No, Joy interrupted, her eyes never leaving Jack. I want to hear this. Jack thinks I'm leading a witch hunt because I dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, Hollywood could do better. That maybe representation matters. That maybe showing women being degraded and brutalized for entertainment has consequences. You want to talk about consequences? Jack leaned forward, his intensity ratcheting up another notch. Let's talk about the consequence of turning art into a moral battlefield. The consequence is that nobody takes risks anymore. Nobody tells uncomfortable truths. Nobody creates anything that might offend someone, somewhere. Everything becomes bland, safe, forgettable. Is that the world you want? Because I don't. I want a world where women can watch a movie without seeing themselves treated like garbage, Joy shot back. Is that so terrible? And I want a world where artists can explore the full range of human experience without being told they're monsters for doing their job, Jack countered. Some of the greatest films ever made deal with ugly subjects. They show terrible people doing terrible things. Should we just erase all of that? Pretend it doesn't exist. There's a difference between showing something and celebrating it, Joy insisted. And there's a difference between portraying a character and endorsing their behavior, Jack replied. But you seem determined to blur that line. Every actor who's ever played a villain, every filmmaker who's ever shown violence or darkness, they're all guilty in your court. Well, I'm not accepting that verdict. Sonny jumped back in, trying to find middle ground. Jack, I think what Joy is trying to say is that we can appreciate the artistry while also acknowledging the cultural impact. Both things can be true, can't they? Jack turned to Sonny, his voice calmer but still intense. Because it doesn't sound like that's what Joy is saying. It sounds like she's saying I should be ashamed of my career, that the work I'm most proud of, the performances that challenged me and audiences, those are somehow problematic now. Well, I'm not ashamed. Not for 1 second. Of course you're not, Joy said, her tone dripping with frustration. Why would you be? You got paid millions of dollars. You won awards. You became a legend. Meanwhile, generations of women watched those films and internalized the message that their value was tied to their looks, that it was normal to be talked down to, that. Stop, Jack interrupted, his voice sharp. Just stop right there. You're creating a narrative that doesn't exist. You're taking films, complex works of art with nuanced themes, and reducing them to the worst possible interpretation. That's not fair to the filmmakers. It's not fair to the audiences who understood what they were watching. And it's definitely not fair to me. Fair? Joy let out a bitter laugh. You want to talk about fair? How about the fact that you could play any kind of character you wanted? No consequences, no questions asked, while actresses were typecast and limited and told to be grateful for whatever scraps they got. Is that fair? That's a completely different issue, Jack said. And if you want to talk about the industry's treatment of women, fine. Let's have that conversation. But don't conflate it with the characters I played. Don't act like me playing a difficult man in a film is the same thing as systemic discrimination in Hollywood. Those are two separate things. Are they? Joy challenged. Because it seems to me like they're connected. The stories we tell reflect our values. And for decades, Hollywood told stories where men, like the characters you played, were the heroes or at least the interesting ones, while women were accessories. And you benefited from that system. Jack's jaw clenched. I benefited from being a good actor. I benefited from working hard and taking roles that scared me. I benefited from collaborating with brilliant directors and writers. Don't reduce my entire career to some political statement about gender dynamics. Everything is political, Jack, Joy said. Especially art. Especially Hollywood. You can pretend it isn't, but that doesn't make it true. And you can pretend that every film is a manifesto, but that doesn't make it true either, Jack shot back. Sometimes a movie is just a movie. Sometimes a character is just a character. Sometimes the point is to make people think or feel or question things, not to give them a moral lesson. Whoopi tried again to intervene. Look, I think we can all agree that art is complicated and interpretation is subjective. No, Joy said firmly. I'm not letting this go. Jack came on this show, and he's going to hear what I have to say. For years, actors like him have hidden behind, it's just a character, while perpetuating harmful stereotypes. And when someone finally calls them out on it, they act like victims. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that your work exists in a vacuum. Jack stood up suddenly, and for a moment, everyone thought he might walk off. But instead, he turned to face Joy directly, his full intensity focused on her. You know what your problem is, Joy? You think you have it all figured out. You think you can watch a film, pick out the parts that don't align with your worldview, and declare the whole thing problematic. But you're missing the point entirely. Art isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's not supposed to confirm what you already believe. It's supposed to challenge you, provoke you, make you see things from perspectives you might not want to see from. Don't lecture me about art, Joy said, standing up as well. I understand art just fine. What I don't understand is why you're so defensive about legitimate criticism. Because it's not legitimate, Jack said, his voice rising again. It's revisionist. It's judgmental. It's everything that's wrong with discourse today. Nobody can just appreciate something for what it is anymore. Everything has to be dissected, politicized, turned into some referendum on society. Maybe that's because society is in crisis, Joy shouted back. Maybe that's because we're finally reckoning with decades of toxic behavior that was normalized through entertainment. And maybe that's because people like you need a scapegoat, Jack fired back, his voice matching her volume. It's easier to blame movies than to deal with actual problems. It's easier to point at actors and say they're responsible for society's ills than to look at the real causes. We're convenient targets, Joy. That's all this is. That is absolutely not what this is, Joy said, her hands gesturing wildly. This is about accountability. This is about recognizing that what we put into the culture matters. But you're so wrapped up in your own legacy, so protective of your precious body of work, that you can't even entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you got some things wrong. I didn't get anything wrong, Jack said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. I made choices as an artist. Some people loved them. Some people hated them. That's how art works. But I'm not going to stand here and let you tell me that my life's work is somehow responsible for society's problems. That's absurd. It's insulting. And frankly, Joy, it's beneath even you. The audience was completely silent now, riveted by the confrontation. The other hosts looked helpless, unsure how to diffuse a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Whoopi put her hand on Jack's arm, but he gently pulled away. Jack, please, let's just take a break, Whoopi said softly. No, Jack said, still staring at Joy. I want to finish this. Joy started something here, and I'm going to see it through. You want to know what I really think? I think you're afraid of complexity. I think you want everything to be simple, black and white, good guys and bad guys. But life isn't like that, Joy. People aren't like that. And the best art, the art that endures, reflects that complexity. It makes you uncomfortable because it holds up a mirror to parts of humanity you'd rather not see. But that's exactly why it's important. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Joy snapped. You don't know anything about what I'm afraid of or what I believe. What I know is that I've spent my entire career speaking truth to power, calling out injustice wherever I see it. And I'm not going to stop just because Jack Nicholson throws a tantrum on my show. A tantrum? Jack let out a harsh laugh. You ambush me with accusations disguised as questions. You dismiss 50 years of work. You basically call me a misogynist on national television. And when I defend myself, you call it a tantrum. That's rich, Joy. That's really rich. I never called you a misogynist, Joy said, though her voice wavered slightly. You implied it, Jack shot back. Don't play semantic games with me. You said my characters were misogynistic, that they treated women like objects, that they did harm. What am I supposed to take from that? That I'm some enlightened person who just happens to play terrible men? Or that maybe there's something of those characters in me? Come on, Joy, own what you're saying. Joy took a deep breath, and for a moment, it seemed like she might back down. But then her jaw set, and she doubled down. Fine. You want me to own it? I'll own it. Yes, I think some of your characters have been problematic. Yes, I think Hollywood has a long history of glorifying toxic masculinity. And yes, I think actors like you, who have the power and the platform to choose better roles, bear some responsibility for that. There. Is that clear enough for you? Crystal clear, Jack said, his voice icy. And here's what's clear to me. You're not interested in a conversation. You're interested in a confession. You want me to grovel, to apologize, to say that everything I've done was wrong. Well, I'm not going to give you that satisfaction. My work speaks for itself. It's been celebrated by critics, by audiences, by my peers. I've won Academy Awards. I've worked with the greatest directors in cinema history. And if you think you can reduce all of that to some political talking point, then you're the one who's lost the plot, not me. Sonny tried one more time to intervene. I think we're all passionate about this topic, and that's good. But maybe we can find common ground. There is no common ground, Joy said, her eyes blazing. Either you believe that art has responsibility, or you don't. Either you believe that representation matters, or you don't. Jack has made his position clear. He thinks he can hide behind artistic freedom and never have to answer for anything. I'm not hiding behind anything, Jack said, his voice rising again. I'm standing right here, Joy. I'm telling you exactly what I think. You're the one who's hiding. Hiding behind self-righteousness. Hiding behind moral superiority. Acting like you're some crusader for justice, when really, you're just another talk show host looking for ratings. The audience gasped again. That was a bridge too far, and everyone knew it. Joy's face went white, then red, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to find words. Get out, Joy said finally, her voice shaking with rage. Get out of here right now. Gladly, Jack said, ripping off his microphone. I never should have come on this show in the first place. I thought we were going to have an actual conversation, but clearly that's not what you do here. You just want guests you can bully and lecture. Whoopi stood up, trying to calm the situation. Jack, please, let's not end it like this. But Jack was already moving toward the edge of the stage. A producer rushed over, then another. Someone called for security. The whole thing was descending into chaos. You're making a mistake, Joy called after him. Walking away just proves my point. Jack turned back one last time. The only mistake I made was thinking you were interested in anything other than tearing people down. You know what the saddest part is, Joy? You could have made an interesting point. We could have had a real discussion about art and responsibility, about how culture evolves, about the relationship between entertainment and society. But you didn't want that. You wanted a fight. Well, congratulations. You got one. Security guards appeared at the edge of the stage. The producer was talking urgently into Jack's ear. The other hosts were on their feet now, some trying to reach Joy, who stood rigid, her chest heaving. Alyssa was saying something about going to commercial. Sunny looked like she might cry. Whoopi just shook her head, disappointment written across her face. This isn't over, Joy said, her voice carrying across the stage. You can run away, but this conversation is happening with or without you. Then have it without me, Jack called back as the security guards gently guided him toward the exit. I'm sure you'll do just fine talking to yourself. You've had plenty of practice. And with that, Jack Nicholson disappeared backstage, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a set full of shell-shocked hosts. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before someone finally called for a commercial break. Joy remained standing, her hands trembling, her face a mask of anger and something else. Something that might have been regret or might have been vindication. It was impossible to tell. The segment that was supposed to be a fun celebrity interview had turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. No one got what they wanted. Jack didn't get to promote his work in peace. Joy didn't get the acknowledgement she was pushing for. The other hosts didn't get to have a productive conversation. And the audience didn't get the lighthearted entertainment they'd come to see. What they got instead was something raw, unfiltered, and completely unscripted. They got to see what happens when two strong personalities with fundamentally different worldviews collide. They got to see the tension that exists beneath so many conversations about art, culture, and responsibility. They got to see that sometimes there are no easy answers, no clean resolutions, just two people shouting past each other, each convinced they're right. The debate about what happened on The View that day would rage on for weeks. Some people sided with Jack, applauding him for standing up for artistic freedom. Others sided with Joy, praising her for holding a powerful figure accountable. Most people probably fell somewhere in between, seeing valid points on both sides and wishing the conversation had gone differently. But one thing was certain, no one who watched that interview would forget it anytime soon. It was messy, uncomfortable, and at times painful to watch. It was also riveting, honest, and utterly human. It was television at its most unpredictable. And whether you think Jack was right to walk off, or Joy was right to push him, you can't deny that it made for one unforgettable show. So, what do you think? Was Jack out of line for how he responded? Or was Joy too aggressive in her questioning? Drop a comment below and let us know where you stand. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, because we've got plenty more stories like this coming your way.